You see the giant statue in Washington, sitting in stone silence, revered as a hero. But rewind 30 years, and you'd find a man drowning in debt, rejected by voters and battling deep depression. The distance between the man who failed and the man who saved the Union is immeasurable. Let's go back to New Salem, Illinois. A young Lincoln isn't thinking about the presidency, he's thinking about survival. He tried to run a general store. He was honest, kind, and a voracious reader, but he was a terrible businessman. The store winked out, leaving him with crushing debt. He jokingly called this debt the national debt because it seemed impossible to pay off. He spent years working odd jobs, surveying land, splitting rails, just to chip away at it. He subsisted on simple meals, often just apples and cornbread, living a frontier life of extreme frugality. He turned to politics, his true passion. His first run for the state legislature, a defeat. He lost his job as a postmaster. He was facing a wall of rejection. At this point in his life, anyone would have told him to give up and find a steady trade. But the hardest blow wasn't financial. It was personal. The death of Anne Rutledge, his first love, sent him spiraling into a deep melancholy. He would wander the woods, gunless, just walking for miles in silence. This darkness could have consumed him, but instead it carved out his soul. In the depths of his despair, he found a battered copy of Blackstone's Commentaries. He taught himself law by candlelight. He didn't go to a fancy university. He read until his eyes burned. This was the turning point. The failed shopkeeper began to sharpen his mind into a weapon. He became a circuit lawyer, riding horses from town to town. He wasn't the most polished man. His clothes were ill-fitting, his voice high-pitched. But when he spoke, people listened. He used humor and logic to win cases. He was building the empathy that would later define his presidency. He finally made it to Congress in 1846. Success? Hardly. He served one term, took an unpopular stance against a war, and returned home to Illinois feeling like his political career was over. He was in his 40s, and by all metrics, he had peaked. He went back to law, seemingly content, but history wasn't done with him. The expansion of slavery into new territories reignited his fire. He couldn't stay silent. He challenged the powerful Stephen Douglas. He lost the Senate seat, but his speeches electrified the nation. You might think losing a Senate race is the end. For Lincoln, it was the launch pad. His Cooper Union speech in New York introduced the prairie lawyer to the East Coast elite. They mocked his appearance, but they were mesmerized by his intellect. 1860, the impossible happened. The man with less than a year of formal schooling was elected president. The after-state begins here, but it wasn't a victory lap, it was a march into hell. The country was tearing itself apart. He grew the iconic beard, perhaps to hide the gauntness of his face. The war began. The failures of his past, the debts, the losses, the depression, had prepared him for this burden. He knew how to endure pain. He knew how to keep going when all seemed lost. The shopkeeper who couldn't sell goods now sold freedom, the Emancipation Proclamation. With a stroke of his pen, he changed the legal status of millions. He didn't just save the Union, he redefined what the Union stood for: liberty. At Gettysburg, he spoke for just 2 minutes. He summarized the American experiment with a clarity that still rings today. The awkward speaker from Illinois had become the voice of a nation's sorrow and its hope. 1865. The war ended. The transformation was absolute. The man who was once mocked as a guerrilla was now the savior of the Republic. He walked through the burning streets of Richmond, not as a conqueror, but as a weary father welcoming his children home. Then the final tragedy. Just as peace arrived, he was taken. But his death only cemented the transformation. He became a martyr, an icon, a legend. The failures of his youth were forgotten, overshadowed by the magnitude of his triumph. Lincoln's life is the ultimate before and after. It teaches us that failure is not fatal. It is fertilizer. Every lost election, every business failure, every moment of despair was a stepping stone to greatness. Even in the White House, he remained the simple man from the log cabin. He ate sparingly, apples, cheese, biscuits. He never let the power corrupt his humility. He was a common man called to an uncommon destiny. If you are struggling today, if you feel like a failure, remember the shopkeeper from New Salem. Remember Lincoln. Your current situation is not your final destination. History is written by those who refuse to quit. From a log cabin to the Lincoln Memorial, from bankruptcy to immortality. Abraham Lincoln shows us that the only way to predict the future is to create it, no matter how many times you fall. Don't forget to hit that subscribe button on Biographies Repo for more incredible stories of resilience. Which historical figure should we cover next? Let us know in the comments below.